In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you two shifts that are actually crucial to help you heal your way from your binge eating. So stay tuned. Welcome to Stop Binging and Start Living. And from the title, this is exactly what I'm going to be helping you through this series in this podcast, through nourishment, movement, and mindset. Because when you understand where these habits are coming from and how to actually create a change, a positive change for the long term, you can start living your life today by creating a life free from binge eating. So I am so excited to have you here, and let's dive into today's episode. Very often, when we talk about binge eating or stress eating or emotional eating, we dive straight into the food. Very often, that can be very helpful because if you look and listen to previous episodes, we saw how food malnourishment actually can be a trigger to binge eating. However, if you're struggling with binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating, there's something that's actually pre-required to help you on this journey of healing. And why is this important and why am I sharing this with you? It's because my name is Dina. I am a health and wellness coach. And really, it is my passion, my mission for the past 22 years to simplify health, simplify nourishment, simplify well-being to help people that are struggling with binge eating, stress eating, and emotional eating. Because I myself struggled with this when there wasn't social media and I couldn't really understand what I was going through. And I'm sharing with you right now the things that have helped me and helped thousands of my clients create a life as they healed through their unhealthy eating behaviors. And here's the thing. There's two shifts I'm going to be mentioning with you today. I'm going to dive more into details regarding this. The thing is, we very often talk about binge eating disorder. Again, we're talking about stress eating, emotional eating. But one thing to actually help you better understand and create freedom from this is the way that we classify binge eating. And I came across a post a while back, and it kind of brought everything to light of exactly what is the work that I'm creating for my clients. Is that instead of looking at binge eating as a disorder, as a struggle, as we attack our self-esteem, lack of motivation, a lack of willpower. How about we look at binge eating as a response and as well as a habit? So when you're able to see binge eating as a response, you're able to take a step back and understanding, okay, I have created this way of turning to food as a response to something external or internal in my life. Because as humans, from the moment we are born, we start creating responses, right? This happens, I react this way. That other thing happens, I react that way. And then the more that we keep doing the same response to a certain external or internal thing, it becomes a habit. It becomes your coping mechanism. It becomes your go-to. So it is not a lack of willpower, of motivation that made you turn to food for emotional, physical, and social reasons. It is that so many things might have happened at one point, and it was beyond your capacity to understand how to move through it. Because when we're young, we need to learn coping mechanisms. But if we're not well supported, we will find the easiest way to deal with a stressor, with an emotion. Food. Easy, accessible, and tasty because it does create a positive physical reaction. When we have those carbs and the sugar, it actually lifts our mood. It actually boosts our happy hormones. So when I was able to look through that post and I'm looking through all the work I've been doing, it really kind of comes together with me saying that sometimes our eating habits are related to a habit, binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating. And we're able to take a step back and saying, okay, let me look at my binge eating as a response. I am turning to food for a physical reason, an emotional reason, or a society reason, a social reason. When you're able to look at it that way, you're able to actually take another step back. And this is the second thing I really wanted you to kind of take away today is that binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating, it is not who you are. It is a response that you have regarding external and internal things. For example, you might be saying, I am a binge eater. And when you tell yourself, I am a binge eater, you're making it part of your personality. But it is not part of your personality. It is a part of a habit to a response that you actually learned from the moment you were young to deal with certain situations, certain emotions. And as well, when we say like, I am a binge eater, I am a stress eater, it kind of becomes part of who you are. And that makes the shift to release the stress eating, binge eating, emotional eating much harder because it feels like you're losing part of your identity. And this is something with many people that are struggling with eating disorders. They've had it for so long, it feels like this is who I am. But when we're able to kind of, again, we take that step back, understanding this is actually a response, a habit. Then we take another step back and saying, this is not who I am. It is a response and a habit that I actually learned to survive through a certain type of stressor, trauma, environment. It makes it, in a way, I find enlightening. To be able that you're here and your eating habit is here. They're not like this. You're able to kind of dissociate and look at it from a third eye perspective, from an above ground perspective, and saying, okay, this is not who I am. This is a response, a coping mechanism that I actually created to survive something on the internal or something in the external environment in my life. And if I created this at a response, I can actually unlearn it and find new ways, new responses, new habits to deal with those internal and external stressors. And what can be those stressors? Stress is a big one that's going to be coming up in the future episodes of the podcast, but as well, your undereating, blood sugar stability, past trauma, emotional distress. There's so many different triggers in the internal external world that actually might make us turn to certain foods, drugs, alcohol, so many different things that we can actually turn to. And yours is food. But when you're able to take a step back and saying, I am not my habits, I just created them out of survival. And right now I want to create new habits so that food is not the only go-to when I'm feeling down. Everything changes. And that's why I said, we take a step back and we take another step back is understanding that you are not a binge eater. You are not an emotional eater. You are not a stress eater. You are struggling with the habit of turning to food when there's internal and external struggles. And you're able to shift the way that you see that. I truly believe it changes so many things. And when you change all that, you're actually as well able to be able to move through the work that we do here that I'm sharing with you over on the podcast, but as well, all the work that you might be doing if we're working together privately, or if there's any other programs that you're doing, to understand that you are not your habits. Habits is a response mechanism, coping mechanism to something on the outside that is actually you had to deal with. Humans, we all have coping mechanisms. And it's all about creating a shift of we cannot avoid the emotions. We cannot avoid the stressors. Yes, there's things we can do in terms of nutritionally, emotionally, and like healing a lot of like past pain and trauma. But understanding that we're always going to be having these struggles in our life and creating a new learned response, a new coping mechanism, a new habit to deal with those, to move through the emotional struggle, to go over it, to go around it, but we still have to always go through it so that it doesn't take up all the space and create a bigger snowball effect than that little snowball that it started with. So I really want you to look at this. How have you been labeling yourself with your stress eating, binge eating, emotional eating? And how can you start as a first homework to shift the way that you are seeing your eating habits, giving yourself a lot of love and compassion and saying, I am struggling with this response, this habit. I learned this out of survival, and I am ready to unlearn it to create new habits so that food becomes fun, becomes nourishment, becomes, yes, tasty. But how can I create a shift the way that I view things, the way that I view this habit, so that I can take away the guilt and the shame behind it? I'm able to move forward and create a life that is free from binge eating, emotional eating, and stress eating. The amount that is actually can be very debilitating in your system. because we might always turn a little bit to food, and it's okay. It's when it becomes too much, or the only way we deal with our emotions, we're turning to food, then we need to start creating a shift to understand what are different coping mechanisms we can actually create, healthy coping mechanisms that make us actually feel good as we're stepping out of it, and not the guilt that can come when we're actually turning to food whenever there's an internal, external trigger. So this is your homework. Shift how you're talking about your habits. See it as a response, as a coping mechanism. Take away the shame and the guilt or the lack of willpower because you created something to be able to survive. And do listen in the future episodes where I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the emotional stress factors and so many other topics as they all come in together to help you see that this is really a multifaceted thing. Many different things can impact it. Every person has different triggers, and by listening in, you'll be able to know what are your triggers to make you turn to food, and how can you actually take those first starting steps to healing your relationship with food. So on that note, I wish you a beautiful and a balanced day. Dina Merby here, and I'll catch you in the next training.